I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly. I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us to look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello, and welcome back, friends. This is the final part of our discussion with the brilliant Schewee about processing centers. If you haven't heard the other two episodes, maybe you're trying to skip right to the body types, you should probably go back and listen through. We weave a lot of concepts throughout our talk, and we wouldn't want you to miss any context or nuggets we might have dropped earlier. But if you've already listened, or maybe you just don't care about the context, then we'll jump right back in.
Joey just says, it so happens, you're up first.
Okay.
So you're taking in the world through your intuitive body center, processing with action. What's the thoughts on eights?
All about action, supporting it with logic. So the two places, I think the only two places where the whole understanding of you're dominant in one, you're repressed in the other. So the third center is your support that actually works with eights and ones. And so starting with, I'm a doing dominant eight, feeling is last, that's my reach. And so thinking supports doing. That actually works for me as an eight. But according to the way I ascribe to it is the understanding is my line, my arrow moving away from me goes to 5, goes to the thinking center. So I come at the world every day with an action processing mindset, and it's supported by logic always. And so when you take everything into consideration that is 8, fast processing, problem solving, standing independent from what's happening, I call 8s problem solvers. I think we all are. I think for 8s, it's absolutely part of our hardwiring, like everything to us, because we have a need to be against, everything's a problem to be solved, ultimately. And I have said that 8s have an egregious, someone else said one time in my life that 8s have egregious self-confidence. And I see it when I say that 8s have a well-cultivated sense of being right. And I think that's because it's less, I say that less about logic and theory. And I say it all about the path, the quickest, most efficient path to solving a problem. 8s usually come up with it very quickly, and it's logical. Where we really miss the boat is we don't have it in us without being conscious of it to consider other people's perspectives. Mm-hmm. And that's where we miss out on community a lot without even realizing it. And sadly, when you talk to 8s, young 8s, without even caring, when I hear young 8s speak and they genuinely say, you don't like me and I don't care. And I cringe. It's cringeworthy because I've done my work, but it's kind of true. And it's true because that doesn't come into the equation when you're actively doing something and supporting it with objective reason. There is no subjective or relational element to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think also I'm going to ask for your forgiveness before saying this, but I think also the only place that subjectivity really comes in is in the fact that other people's thoughts on this don't matter. Like the subjectivity is self-focused. Like it's anyone who disagrees with me is just wrong.
So I'm going to adjust that because I actually think that is more applicable to ones. than it is to 8s. And I'm just going to change your language, and I'm going to say that your way you let it all up to isn't the way it you said it's self-focused, and I don't believe that. I believe for 8s it's task focused.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
And I think a real misunderstanding in the world is people assume because we're so independent and self-confident that we are walking away from any problem we solve, patting ourselves on the back when we are not.
Right.
Because we didn't do it for the pat on the back, and we're on to the next thing.
Right.
So I'm there with you, except that I just think anything relational or subjective doesn't come into play for 8s when we're accomplishing the task at hand. And it should, because we have an ability to bring others along. And unless you're the underdog who we have determined you can't do it for yourself, we don't bring the heart piece in to bring you along. And that means that the world misunderstands 8s, and 8s miss out on a lot that I think is important for our own well-being.
Well, I think this is part of this may be one of the central parts of the fact that like 8s are the most misunderstood number, and it's so difficult for so many of us, like even me being right next to you, to understand, to think about, to internalize the fact that 8s. That self-confidence is not about them thinking they're the greatest in the world. They aren't thinking about themselves the way that we think they are. They're processing with doing. They're focused on the task. That energy is like 3s want the pat on the back. There's a lot of people who want the pat on the back, and they're thinking of themselves in the way that other people think about them, and like there's so much other kinds of processing there, and for 8s, in the way that they don't care about other people, it's not because they see themselves as superior, it's because they don't care, because that part
and
is
we don't think about you.
Right.
Like TJ, what you're saying, take it all the way. My self-confidence has nothing to do with feeling superior.
Right.
Because feeling superior means that I'm considering you.
Right.
And I'm not even considering you on that level.
Right. And not in a way that is intentionally dismissive. You're not trying to hurt my feelings. It's just not there.
It's not task or logic.
Yep.
Period. Like I'm just on that. It's objective action, objective action, objective action. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is something that is very difficult for many of us, many of the rest of us to understand at all.
I know. I'm sorry. I can say I'm sorry, and I don't care now, because I really, I do feel passionate about, interestingly enough, people understanding 8s, not necessarily you understanding me. Because it's still there.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great line. You should write that down.
Yeah.
That's a good line. 2 big words for me in understanding 8s, at least that allow me to peer into the heart of my child, are agency and vulnerability. And that's what I hear in some of this language, is because agency is a desire of all the Baha'i triad, but my understanding is the sense of vulnerability is severe, and there is a quick and easy way to not be vulnerable, and it's to stand independent. And because that is so severe, that move is gonna get grabbed. And I can do it because the primary need or the primary desire is to not feel vulnerable. And that my imagination goes down this road that becomes habitual in a lot of 8s. And unless you do a lot of work, then it's probably going to influence how you relate to other human beings.
And I love what you said. And the only word I would change that's important is you mentioned it being a move to stand independent.
Sure.
And I think our natural stance is to stand independent. I don't think we consciously choose it. I think that's the starting point.
Yeah.
We've mentioned some parenting stuff that Billy and I do some work with Enneagram and parenting, and I am on niece number 2 now. I have 5, but my sister's youngest, when she was young, growing up, she was very aggressive, behaviorally. And the family conversation was, she's got to be, right? She's got to be an 8. She's just so aggressive. She's got to be an 8. And my sister would say to my mom over and over, was Joey like this? Was Joey like this? And the answer was no. And we're kind of saying, well, maybe my upbringing was different, all the things. Now we're on niece number 2. So aggressive with her control of the environment. And what I am beginning to think and explore and say, I think independent is such an important term for 3s, 7s, and 8s, because I don't think as children, and I would love to know if this tracks with your child, Jeff, we're not outwardly controlling the environment as children because we can stand independent from it. So I'm starting to tell people, if you have that really aggressive controlling of the environment child, my thought, and it's panned out with my first niece, and I'm guessing it's going to pan out with the second, they're 6s who have not figured out how to passive aggressively control or passive control. And so, because just that comes with age. And so their reference point is external. They want control because 6s are the most controlling. So I think that's important to look at because that tracks all the way. 8s are passionate, but we're not aggressively controlling you because we don't need to control you. That would require having some kind of focus on you.
Right.
And I think once an 8 shifts a focus to others, it's only insecurity and it's in 2. And it's a whole different space.
Yeah, I think that's right. The external
And it's a vulnerable
energy.
space.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's what I would say.
Yep.
Like 2's where I reach vulnerability for sure.
I suppose my experience, this is an intuitive understanding. There's engaging people who have external energy who might mistype as 8s. And then there's the time that you actually encounter an 8 and you get hit. And when 8s hit, it feels different.
Yes.
It's whereas, as you were saying, like the external energy of wanting to control things, that can come across from a bunch of different numbers. I'm obviously one of those numbers, but 8s will punch you in a way that insists on some space between you and them in a way that nobody else does. Or even they can walk into a room and you're like, barometric pressure changed. I don't know what happened. Oh, Tony's here. And that's just and we have sympathy for you on that one, by the way.
And what's fascinating is we're not conscious of that.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's where half the misunderstanding comes is people assume because the rest of the world is conscious of that 8s have to be, and then we're choosing that. No, we are not aware of how we come across.
And that's the through line with 3s, 7s, and 8s. We're all just wanting something from you. Just care about us a little bit. And there it is. And thoughts, Steve?
I don't have much to add. I'm mentally preparing for the 9 second.
Last thing I wanted to talk about was just the direction of energy. And obviously, we've been talking about this. It's going external for the 8. When we talk about 8s connecting relationally with others, I have the sense that the 8s are giving a gift. They're giving the strength that they have. And you had mentioned the word. It was a great word. You had said something like, unless it's the underdog. And it was a footnote, but it's an incredibly important footnote in terms of the 8's radar is out there. What's going to hurt me? Where am I vulnerable? But if there's an underdog, that seems to me a place, as you were kind of saying, that it's here's a space where I can engage to and not be vulnerable because this person probably doesn't have the power to injure me, as it were, is how I suppose I read that.
I think the way an 8 reads it is not observant of the vulnerability piece, but I think that's where our expectations are eased. I believe 8s have the highest expectations of everyone all the time.
That's good.
Probably followed closely, Jeff, by 1s, but I believe 8s. I mean, it's just, we have an automatic, very high expectation of the world. And I think where the underdog comes in is we don't lower the expectation. We recognize that the underdog needs to see that they can do it. I think for everyone else, we recognize immediately, you can do it. You're just not choosing to do it well.
Right.
Like, do better. I saw the most hilarious, I've sent it to like 20 people. It was, a meme or something on TikTok that said, I gave someone a get well card, or I gave someone a get better card. Not because they were sick, but I just thought they could do better. And I feel like I could just carry those around with me at night, right? Because it's my filter and my processing center. Like, you just do better. And I think with the underdog, that's where we can safely it's not deny vulnerability. I think that's where we can safely be vulnerable because it's on behalf of someone, I think is what I would say. Yeah.
That's also, and we've talked a lot about security numbers, but that feels like an easy bridge. If you're identifying the underdog, that is a bridge for you to experience 2 tools, correct?
True. Absolutely. And I think that's all where 2 comes from. In the same space, I would say authenticity's number 1 for us, for 8s. I think it's as important as it is for 4s, for sure. And we have 0 space for feigned vulnerability or neediness. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna, don't think, oh, if I just come to an 8, if I want to connect with an 8, I need to be weak. No, that's actually the opposite of what you need to do.
I could see.
And the only other thing I would add is, as I'm doing this work, I've talked to Billy about this probably 3 or 4 times in the last month or so, because I'm kind of in a new space in life where I'm trying to do some writing, that sort of thing. I've really been doing this work, and as a result, I'm less angry. And it is messing with my mojo because it has severely depleted my energy.
Yeah.
We have the most energy because we get energy from anger. Yeah. And when you take anger off the table, you don't have the abundance of energy that you used to have.
Why are you less angry?
Because I'm keeping in line with 2, and I'm going inside, and I'm trying to connect more with others. All the things I would do to be more balanced are all great. And
it's coming.
My 9 sister doesn't know what to do with me. She literally doesn't. Her 8 wing is like, where are you? What's happening? I need you to be upset about this. We went skiing a couple years ago, and something happened where she and I went to go pick up pizza, and there was something that happened with, we parked in the wrong spot or something, and there was a sign. My sister was so mad. Like, they wrote on her car with shoe polish. I was like, well, we parked in the wrong spot. She was like, what happened to you? I need you to go scorch the earth with me. What is going on? I'm like, I don't. We did park in the wrong spot. I need to go take a nap because I'm not mad.
Is there a discipline that's worth naming for 8s on this front? The active writing? Was it the writing about others?
It's the act of the very thing that my parents tried to push, and now they don't let anyone have an excuse anymore. It's contemplative prayer and sitting. It's just a sit. I do it every day. And my parents are like, no one can ever, contemplative, okay. Just a sit. I have a sit every single day. I do not record or write without having a sit.
Bing. By the way, pass on from the rest of us that they should define sits sometimes for the rest. I assume that this is a time of pausing. What is a sit?
So I'll just tell you mine. I think you have to decide what works best for you, but mine is with a timer, and it's 15 minutes. That's followed with a very specific prayer that takes about 5. So we're talking about 20 minutes. And I set the timer personally to ding halfway through. And I have to say something. If I don't say something over and over like a mantra, my mind just is going to go too many places. And so I say something at the beginning for the first 7.5 minutes, and then I say something to myself over and over for the second. And I don't mind sharing. I mean, I don't know that it'll work for everyone, but the first half is the psalm, create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. And the second half is Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, make me, use me. And I do that over and over, and then I follow with prayer. And darn it if it's not working.
And working in your mind is removing some of the power, unhealthy power of your underlying feeling.
Yes, because then when I have the feeling, I'm not nearly as quick to replace it with anger. Like
Right.
I believe that until eights do some inner work, any emotion that crops up, even happiness, we're going to we could have a tinge of anger. It's going to seem aggressive, but especially any negative emotion or any vulnerability, any kind of vulnerability pops up when I'm not doing work, and I'm just going to replace it with anger and scorch the earth.
Right. It's excellent. Let's move on to nines. All right, buddy.
We're here.
Finally.
Taking the
One
world
thing I
through
came for.
nines, taking the world through their body process, through thinking. What's your take on this, Joey?
Well, I would say that after threes, the first place I went, after saying, yeah, it's clear threes process with action, I said, okay, well, then that means nines are going to move and shift to thinking and process with logic. And that couldn't be more true. And it was, it hit home, especially for me, being married to Billy, being married to a nine, because I've been aware, and it's kind of like it was always floating there throughout our marriage and parenting, that he doesn't, while he's conscious of others and not wanting to rock the boat, when he connects, it's not on an emotional level. And I think I saw it the most in co-parenting our four, because I was finding that I could relate to Will's emotions much easier than Billy could as a nine. He he could see where Will was coming from, and he could see it from Will's point of view, but he couldn't jump into the emotions with Will like I could. And so for me, that cleared it up. He's not choosing, yes, doing's last, but he's not choosing feeling or subjectivity, subjectivity and feeling or logic. He is defaulting and doubling down on an objective reason every time.
You got thoughts, Siege?
No notes. No, I'm just kidding. As a nine, other nines hopefully will sympathize with this, but there's a sense of like seeing myself in every other type, and so anytime I go through the whole system, like in a new book or something, there's always moments of like, am I actually a 2? No, I'm a 9. Am I a 3? No, I'm a 9. Am I okay? And this happens the most with 4s and 5s, and particularly with 5s. There's a way of seeing and understanding and wanting to see the bigger picture that it's just part of me, and I want to solve puzzles. I love puzzles, not jigsaw puzzles, but like, how does this thing work and fit? Like, I want to solve puzzles, and I want to figure out how these things work. And when you brought this up in our last podcast, that like all of a sudden is like this shifted a bunch of gears into place to make a bunch of other things work. And while it's very clear to anyone who knows me, and I think this is very clear of 9s, like the unproductive doing, we're not doing the things that we need to do, but the next best thing to the things that we're supposed to be doing is solving some kind of puzzle, is figuring out how something can work in place. And I also think that like we do have a lot, 9s do have a lot of access to a sense of feelings, but it's not like it's not really feeling them, it's understanding them in a way, and also like making sense of the both sides part. Like if we can see both sides of everything, it's making sense of why someone else would feel this way about X, because it makes sense if we can understand their side. But it's not about feeling. It's not about the real like subjectivity there. We still see it objectively. So, yeah.
I love that you said the seeing both sides, because that is one place, TJ, where I absolutely see in nines the objective reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like
there
seeing
you go.
your side and seeing your side also seems to me to be unbelievably objective.
Yeah. Yep. And it's omnipresent. It is everywhere for my entire life, all the time, in everything. And even when I choose for it not to be, it can still be forced into me against my will. Like someone tells me a story about someone that I really detest, and it's like, this is what happened to them when they were young. And it's like, well, great. Now I have that information. I can't hate them anymore.
Because that's objective.
Objective, yeah.
Yes.
What I hear here is that similar play with 369s. You're taking in the world through your intelligence center, taking it in intuitively, and then the barrier comes up, your value shoots forward, and it's, I want to maintain the shalom that I experience, and the move is mental at that moment. And the mental move is reinforced by your stance, which is, well, how am I going to get this shalom? I'm going to take a big step back and enjoy my withdrawn space.
Yeah.
And that flow of energy seems clear.
And I don't think we give enough airtime to the inner conflict in nine.
Right. And then the direction is both ways.
Right? Like I'd love to hear you talk about it, TJ. And I've only just now been really talking. I haven't really approached it with Billy yet, but to be so conflict avoidant, I find that it seems like you've got a lot of inner conflict just in, where do I stand? Mm-hmm. Because I see the world so objectively. It's almost like seeing without the subjective view is what almost causes that conflict, because it's hard to know where you stand, because you can always see the objectivity of another person's viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. And we talk about nines being asleep to themselves, and we defer to other people, and particularly with emotions and so much of that. And I think part of that is because of that internal conflict. It's so exhausting to not really be able to land in a spot, because we know what we want. Oftentimes we paint this picture that nines don't really know what they want. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think nines have gotten in a habit of ignoring what they want, because we much prefer to avoid the conflict. And
internally and externally.
Yes. And so part of that internal conflict is because we are intentionally shelving our actual desires to try and come up with a non-subjective path into whatever is going on out there. And so we're not creating conflict intentionally, but the thing that we're doing instinctively is by its nature creating conflict. I would rather put myself on the side in order to appease you, because I don't want to deal with the conflict. And now I have the internal conflict of having ignored myself for the sake of this thing, and all of it playing. And now, man, I need a nap. This is exhausting.
Well, because anger's going to be part of there now, because you can't get away from that.
And now I'm angry that I'm not getting the thing that I want, even though I intentionally gave it away. And yeah.
Man, I love it. And that's why you're so tired.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that a big part of it, at least my experience with anger coming out sideways, a big part of that is when I can't be objective anymore. When I hit a wall where objectivity is thrown out the window, and my whole subjective self is just screaming at my best friend in the middle of a coffee shop,
So interesting.
Joey, your prompt opened up a door for me. If you're asking the 9, how do you know where do you stand? And the 9 is physically repressed, is repressed in their physicality. That is you're putting your thumb on their repressed center. The heart's message of your presence matters is an affirmation over your repressed center at that level. But so too for the 8s, I will not betray you is likewise. That's a relational claim, and that's targeting your feelings.
Interesting.
And so too for the 1. If you were saying you are good to a 1, that's meant to be an objective claim. That's meant to be something that their head can get around in terms of giving them some grounding. The image of how do I want to say this? Yeah, I suppose that's a prompt for body types of like naming where your repressed center is and how is it that the heart's message is coloring those. But I had never thought of that in terms of 9s not physically knowing their place. Because I think this is what we miss with body types is just how physical things are. Intuitions are spatial in nature, in my experience.
Very much so.
Just as a way of sort of demonstrating that, I've been thinking about this as long as I've been trying to trying to get my mind around this idea of processing, being, thinking. When I come into a new space and I have to fill it with furniture, I have to wait because I need to enter the space to feel it. Like I need to feel what the space is. And then I have to mentally process like what needs to go where and what's the best arrangement. But I can't do that with a drawing. I can't do that without like really getting a physical sense of the space, the things that are going to go in there. And like the idea of buying furniture at IKEA because I picked it out from a catalog is crazy to me because like you've never touched it. How could you know if that's the thing that you actually want? But still, I can't decide what to do with it until I've been able to mentally figure out what the best potential layout would be.
Okay, like, by the way, TJ, this is why I'm going nuts with the furniture in the Ambry.
Yeah.
So I've spent the last 2 years on a project, Joey, we bought this very old 120-year-old building, redesigned it, and someone else is picking out the furniture for the building. But the furniture, in my mind, is incredibly important in terms of your feel of the space. Healthy one that I am, I have surrendered this without any objections and said, this is somebody else's task to do, and I will not come. I will defer, and it internally is wrecking me for these for these very reasons. But I need to feel the thing in the space. Do you have that experience either with furniture, or I also have this experience with what I write? I need to get the feel for the words, but I don't know if that's because I'm.
No, I think that carries to all three of us for sure. Yes, yeah. I'm a very I gotta hold it, feel it, know it, for sure.
We did talk about the direction, but is anything else worth saying there in terms of your processing how to find the shalom that is desired? That is, we see that in 9's behavior in terms of externally trying to keep things calm, but it needs to get named with 3s, 6s, and 9s, that same energy is going inward. I'm trying to keep my inner life solid and stable and undisturbed.
I think when we look at the reality that we've set up for 3s and 6s, that as the primary types who can move either direction, they kind of choose. I do find that I think 9s more than 3s and 6s tend to follow their natural order, meaning move with the arrows. So where 3s are reluctant to stop in 9 and 6s are reluctant sometimes to move to action in 3, I actually think, TJ, for you, it is much easier for you to move into 6 space than overdoing an action. right?
Yeah.
I think honestly, more often than not, and I would want to hear what you say is, you might double down on thinking almost. I don't know that it's more, because I think 3s really, really lean into action hard and 6s into subjectivity. But I do find that you seem to, it's easier for you to go from 6 than to 3. And the language I like to use is, I think what 6 gives you is that your presence is noticed. So if you look at Lost Childhood Message, your presence matters. Mm-hmm. I think what drawing from 6 does is, I am part of something. I have a part, not so much that it matters yet, but that I am a recognizable part. And then 3, I think I said this last time, and if not, I think it's worth repeating. Have you ever met a 3 who didn't believe their presence mattered?
Right.
And 3 takes you from, my presence is noticeable and a part of all this, and I'm part of a team too. My presence on this team, in this community, matters. And I think when you get there, your doing is so good. And it's not just right action. Like, it's just really, really good, important doing.
Yeah. Once
you travel all the way through and realize, yes, I'm part of a team and my presence matters.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole concept of right action, I see a lot of teachers trying to emphasize that right action is sort of like a rare thing. Like and I, on one side, I believe that, in the objective part of me, in part, I believe that, like, the big, like, 99 Theses, I don't think Martin Luther was a 9, but that is a big, important thing that changed the world. And like that, like, the idea of right action being some type of seminal moment, I think is good and important, but at the same time, like, doing the good things in the places that they need to be done. Like, there's so much there. And yeah, just pondering that, like, that path being easy. Well, it's also the case that because doing is something that takes effort and relationships require other people, being in the objective place is just simply easier. Like, it just from a practical perspective.
Yeah.
The 9 picking up thinking is easier than the other 2. And so it's easier for us to spend more time there and to move from there into something else. So
I love that you unpacked the right action a little more, because I not only believe that it happens in greater quantities than has been previously taught. I'm hearing a ton of 9s say, you know what, there's not these, like, landmark moments. Like, just, I feel like Billy engages in right action every time he chooses to stick to a routine, stick to baseline doing, do what needs to be done, and be present to our family fully. I feel like that's, honestly, for the part of a 9, because your energy level is so low, that's right action every day.
It's huge. And for us, it's so big and important because it helps get the momentum going.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had a 9 say recently that when they finally just get to doing, they have more energy for doing.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Object in motion tends to stay in motion. Logic there
Right.
for 9s.
Inertia.
There it is.
It's also the case that we should come first full circle here, that this is the 9 returning to home base was the language earlier. And so.
Which I love. I love that.
Yeah.
Bang.
Home base.
In good news, we only have limited time to cover the 1s, and so this will be
no,
brief.
I can stay for another hour if we need that long to unpack this, Jeff.
Nobody needs therapy here, Joey. What did you say about withdrawing emotional repression, something like that? On 1s are going to take in the world through their body center. By the way, the only reason we do this podcast, dear listener, we never say this, is so TJ and I can have therapy, and it's kind of cheap.
Yeah, it's basically
we just want to work out our own issues publicly. 1s are going to take in the world through their body, through their intuitive center, and process with action. Joey, what's the skinny on 1s?
I love this because I think it is such a clear way to explain ones in the world, especially in the workplace where I encounter them the most in terms of an Enneagram teaching space. And that is you process with action, and your actions are supported by a subjective view. And it's a subjective view of what's best and what's right. And I cannot say enough, your heart is in the right place always. And you expend a ton of mental energy, and so much of the mental energy of ones that surrounds doing is highly subjective.
I think that's incredibly important because there's an illusion for thinking repressed types in general, I think, move much more toward the white and black way of reasoning because it's easiest. But in reality, it's a subjective view of what's best. I like best much better than the idea of right and wrong.
I agree. And I like it too. You're the second person recently to bring up best when it comes to ones. And I think we tend to put that on threes or eights. And I don't know. I mean, for all of us as doing processors, there's a high value attached to our output of doing. But I think the subjectivity and the care around what it means to be best, truly, and not image-wise, I think that's something that ones really carry, and that can weigh you down sometimes because your reference point's outside of you, and no one else is taking that care that you're taking.
Just a point on that, it seems that the arriving at your view of what is best is incredibly intuitive for the one, and that's why it's so strong. It's like, well, of course this is how things are because you're intuiting, but intuiting is a subjective emotional processing of the world there. What do you see with ones, Steve?
Yeah, I think that like bringing this word subjective into this our understanding of ones is gonna be really important. And like when we say right and wrong, we're potentially talking about something that is fixed. And so when we talk about ones and quote right and wrong, we don't like it almost creates this giant barrier for us to get to the truth, because right and wrong may not be subjective in the end. And all of us, especially ones, should understand that the one's definition of quote right and wrong is their own subjective view. It might line up with truth, but it might not also. And like subjectivity is so important there. It doesn't change the reality for them, but it is really important for all of us to understand that like when ones are really into this, what is the best way? What is the best version of myself that I can possibly be? It is subjective, but it is still very, very real for them.
And I think the subjectivity that's also pulled in when you look at justice. Mm-hmm. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, that I think that's most acute for 8, 9, and 1 for the three of us. Right. I think that goes with gut triad. But TJ, you can objectively see when someone isn't, you've got positive presumption mm-hmm. with an objective lens on why it might not be. I'm either going to stand independent or I'm going to attack it. Ones, I think, because of that subjectivity and the emotion, I think that's where you see that, you see it split. Yes, it represents subjectivity, but also emotion, because Jeff feels more strongly about everyone's doing than you or I ever will.
Right.
Is that true across the board with ones? I associate that with sexual subtypes.
I think it's more ones than sexual subtypes for sure. Okay. And so I would guess, and it's just because you're looking at that combo. That combo doesn't happen anywhere else. You don't have, you have twos where feeling is supported by doing, but you're the only combo where doing is supported by feeling. Perfect. So it's got to be the strongest with you.
as we're talking, this is I want to return to that idea of spaces and your physicality and just the way that the environment affects the one. I imagine it's the case that, at least with myself in part, the behavior of others isn't relational. It is about the space. You know, are you upsetting something that I intuit as being best for our shared space? And that might be my home. I imagine a lot of ones can go very intensely about how their home feels, or their work environment, or, you know, anyone who knows me, like, we have a shared community, we have a shared country, we have a shared way that we are in the world as citizens. But all of those have that physical dynamic to them that's colored with the value judgment, the subjective value judgment. This is what is best for us.
Mm-hmm.
I have more thoughts on that, but it seems to me the energy for ones is going inward in terms of the direction of their anger. But I'm identifying, part of my identity is with my body. It's also with my home. It's also with my family. It's also with my church. It's also with my work. It's also with my country. These are part of my identity. My anger is going inward. It looks like it's going outward in some sense, but I am radically critiquing myself. And I can see this with a lot, with like unhealthy ones who might be just brutal in terms of how their family dynamic works, or how their church functions, or how their work environment is. And the anger is of that sort, it seems to me.
I almost wonder if you can gauge health. I've never considered this, so I'm just talking as I think, truly. If you can gauge the health level of ones based on how much they're lashing out against the world to avoid putting it on themselves.
It's actually opposite. I think
it's opposite. Okay.
I think it's spilling. I think when you see an angry one, what has happened is they have already exhausted the cauldron of anger inwardly, and now it is spilling out everywhere else.
That's how I've described it in the past. I mean, when I describe ones in corporate America, I say, you're going to get angry at work, but it wouldn't be right or good to show that anger. And so your hardwiring is, I'm going to turn it inside. Mm-hmm. So I always take that time to remind everyone in the room that whatever you've received in terms of criticism from the one, you can be guaranteed that it was first and worst put on the ones themselves. So that definitely tracks. And then the way I carry that out is it has to go somewhere. You can only deal with, once you have the help of the inner critic, you can only carry that and burden yourself with it for so long. And so you're looking for an outlet. And because your filter and processing center is doing, and your reference points outside of you, it's usually going to be on something trivial in the big picture that hasn't been done well, because that's where you can put it, traffic, neighbor's noisy dog, the incorrectly loaded dishwasher. That's going to get it's not what caused you to be angry to begin with. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back is the way I see it. Does that track?
Yep. It does in part. And I suppose I'm also just verbally processing one ought to think about how ones relate to blame. The natural inclination, blame is a big idea, a big part of coming to the world. Something's broken. There's something broken here. And the immediate reaction is, okay, I'm going to self-check. Because I'm a responsive type, because I'm a reactive type, I earn what I want in the world. And so I need to shore that up first. Was I to blame? If I wasn't to blame, it might be the case I pivot with that energy, because that energy needs to go somewhere. And I can use that blame as a weapon against others. So my child is failing at school. I did my due diligence. I did the 28 points of being a successful, good parent, and they all have check marks. So clearly it must be the teacher. It must be the institution. It must be, societal factors, however that's going to play out. I feel like the energy, we had talked about anger as a fuel. If somebody hands you, a gallon of gasoline, it's fuel and you have it, and it can actually be used to burn you up, that's the inner critic move. Or there's a repellent. I can escape doing great damage to myself in terms of self-criticism by taking that gallon of gasoline and thrusting it elsewhere. That can be an option. And that's the black and whiteness comes in a lot there, because it's either you or me on that. It's either the government and how bad it is, or clearly I was the one at fault.
And you can't help it coming back to you, even if you put the kerosene elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because you are hyper aware in ways that eights aren't of your impact, then you can beat yourself up based on that reaction as well.
Yeah, then the body type comes in at that point, because I'm gonna thrust all that energy elsewhere, and then I'm gonna intuit what happened. And you'll see this all the time with ones, because they do it poorly, and then they self-criticize how they responded yesterday. So they got to call and apologize for 12 minutes to the person,
So because we're in the same triad and we're both processing with doing, the two things that you said that resonated the strongest with me are blame and lists.
Okay.
Because those do not factor into anything that goes into my doing.
Yep.
So talk about that, because blame seems like blame to me says subjectivity, says there's feeling involved. There has to be we have to have a solution to how I feel, and blame will do that.
Yep.
And then list just screams process. Trust the process, because it's a proven way of doing, right? You don't need logic if you've got a process.
The target for all three of us is something like justice or shalom. It's having everything in its right place. That's my strategy for achieving that end, but that's not how eights function.
Yeah.
And the stance, I think this is where the stance would really play in, is how am I going to get what I want? And it's got to be, for me, it's twofold. Lists are about elevating my repressed thinking, because I'm in the moment. I'm in the moment all the time. And so the only way that I can get a handle on all the details is to, in the moment, write down all the things that strike my intuitions. And that's how the lists and the calendars emerge for me. Is they're very spontaneous. They're very, something needs to be done, but I'm not going to remember it. And so it needs to get on paper someplace. Yeah, and then the blame is about earning. It's the opposite of earning. It's the antithesis to my stance.
So I'm fascinated by you saying that lists help you elevate your thinking.
Yeah.
Because when I think about someone who technically, like a TJ, who processes logic, so justifiably you would say he has elevated thinking. Lists don't do anything for him.
Right.
Because you subjectively choose what you want to do in whatever order you want to do. But I don't know that I've ever thought about lists as a way to elevate.
What is taking place is I'm outsourcing my thinking to the piece of paper. And the piece of paper is going to show me how I'm going to be good in the world. I'm going to check mark all these suckers. And because I have done my due diligence by check marking everything that hit my intuitions over, the certain amount of time, I'm clearly without blame, because I knocked out the to-do list. And that's a shield, as it were, because I'm going to be defensive when something breaks. But I did the list. And if it wasn't on the list, guess what's going to happen?
What's going on next time? It will never not be on the list.
Well, and I'm going to blame myself for not having thought through the fact that it should have been done. So one of this big project that I've been working on the last 2 years, I messed up one thing. And it literally is going to cost me more money than I've made in my entire life. And in terms of I have to take out more debt and the rest. Long story short, though, it's one of those things that the feeling, the energy. Here's the anger. The thing that fuels me to finish this project ends up being that's where the like get it done kind of energy that can come from anger can emerge. Is screwed this up, need to knock this out, need to complete it. This needs to be done so that I feel good in the world. If I can complete this, make it whole, then processing center, my actions have achieved the goodness that I'm looking to feel in the world, you know?
And blame is such a one term. Like I don't think any other number deals with blame on the level, has a focus on blame.
Do 2s and 6s go down that road?
I wouldn't think like 1s do. No. Because 2s are looking to extend the olive branch. And their positive I would think 2's positive outlook would keep them from blame. And I would think 6s seem to me in that reactive space for it to be more about just getting the emotion out, but it's not like I say, it seems like it's a resolution for you that I think that's a fascinating term that I want to work more with 1s because, and then of course, you know, where my brain goes is there something like that for every type? Is the resolution of your subjective anger blame? So what would the resolution of my anger would be? And what would the resolution of TJ's anger, what would that be?
Can you define
It's interesting. We can't go down that path. When you resolution is my word.
Yeah. What do you mean by resolution?
I feel like blame resolves your processing and support center. Blame is the only way to resolve feeling about what hasn't been done or hasn't been done well or hasn't been done right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it moves like that processing center, what if you're taking in everything through your body and your intuitions and like the way that information needs to be handled is about something to do, then when something has been done wrong or has not been done the way it's like something needs to happen to fix it. And who is going to fix it is a part of what needs to happen to fix it. So like the doing processing is all over what blame is. Like we need to know who is responsible for this problem because they're the ones that are supposed to fix it.
And the who is not just, that's what brings in the people part of the feeling.
Right.
So we've talked about subjective, but it's putting it on a person. It brings that people angle right back in.
Right. Because if it's no one, then it's not a problem. Like it's too complicated. Like it's too messy. It's when you back up and be objective about things like that, then like it can't just be this is a thing that happened and no one's at fault because somebody has to be to blame because we have to do something about it.
Which leads 1s, I think that this blame thing we're talking about is why accountability is such, man, if you're passionate about anything 1s, I would think it would be accountability.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to think on that one.
You start a lot of conversations with accountability. Like
I do?
Yeah, this is the like putting out too much information. This is the here's how I got to this thinking process so that you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Because accountability is going to avoid having to blame, right?
Yeah. So when you hear a 1 say, just so you know, yesterday I said this thing and this how this happened, all of that is trying to shore up blame on that front.
Yeah.
So to give away the farm, I routinely think the thing that needs to have the most work presently in Enneagram is orientation of time, and maybe because of my oneness, I am taking in the world through the present, responding in the present. When I go to stress, I'm all 4, which is past, and then
Past.
security, I'm going to 7, which is future, and so I'm very aware of how time dynamics work, but the only way that I can function in the world is by creating the list is really what it is a system. What it is a way of in the present, I have to establish a structure, a cognitive structure in which to function by which I can avoid the anger that's going inward. That really is it. I think the inward anger is principle and responding to the inward anger with something. I can't live under the abuse of anger criticism. And that's going to describe probably 80% of what you see in ones that make you nuts in
that struggle.
And so systems do that. And that's why they have such power in the minds of ones. It's right and wrong because it is protecting me from an abuser. And if you take that away from me, I'm going to get pummeled. You know what I mean? Anyway, you see where I'm going.
I love it.
Bing, we can stop with ones. No, the last word on ones?
The only other thing I would say, because I love your response, Jeff, is what I say to ones in the workplace is, if you believe that your way, when you are taking a strong stance that the current way, the current process is the only way, it's the best way, it's the only, that's highly subjective. Like, to be so sure of your correctness is subjective. And so I say that I'll use 8s as an example, and I'll say, when I reach feeling as an 8, this is not groundbreaking stuff. It doesn't mean I want to stand in the halls and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. What 2 gives me is just, I'm more considerate. Like, that's what it is. It's not, it doesn't change who I am, but it does elevate who I am.
Yep.
And what I say about ones with logic is, when you reach logic, it's like you don't need to be signing up for Mensa. What it means is you'll know you've reached it when you are more flexible.
It's the identical move, because if you're making the pivot to 7 space for the 1, the flexibility and the independence. I think I want to really emphasize the taking the independent posture for the 1, which is difficult. I'm not used to that because I'm so invested and responsible and all the things. The in 7 space, if you can pivot to independence, and then where are we going to jump? I think that goes alongside identically what you're experiencing as an 8 and 2 space.
Yeah.
Bang.
And it elevates you as a 1. I love that line. Yeah. Yeah.
And remembering that independent is not the same thing as self-centered. Independent and solitary are different things.
Might be worth, and I'm just to throw out an invitation. I would love to talk about. I have theories about how you get your security number. I don't think your security number is where you live, but it is the case that engaging those tools, elevating in that sense, is something that is difficult. It's going against the lines in some diagrams. Well worth talking about if you're interested in the future. I would love to pick your brain. I've mentioned Riso and Hudson a handful of times on this front, but for ones, their language, I think, does work and goes alongside what you're saying. It's, you have to sacrifice your darlings here, ones. You have to sacrifice your system. It protected you from self-abuse, and yet it's also the obstacle to you enjoying the security that's available. And that's a hard place to balance, but.
Well, and the way I see that to work well in my understanding is 7s hate predictability. So removing the predictability of a system is getting to the heart of where 7s thrive.
Yeah. And that can be a virtue. Bang. Last word, TJ.
I don't think I have anything else to add.
Have responsibilities, I bet. TJ still has a 3-year-old.
It's true.
So our empathy goes.
I'm going to give you some of mine. I've got some to give. I definitely am not that parent who looks at children, parents with younger children, and I long for those days. I've never been that parent. I'm like, look where I am.
Yeah, right.
Teenagers driving a car is so much better than potty training.
Right.
Although there is something to be said. I don't know if you do this, Jerry. There is something to be said about tracking your kids on their phones.
Live
Where
360.
are you? Yeah.
Gotta love it. Yeah, they can't get away with much these days.
Well, I'm looking to see if they've gotten in a car wreck, and like I don't know that they're home yet. And where are you?
It happened in the early. My 17-year-old has proven himself to be a good, safe driver, and so
Yeah.
I'm less anxious. But oh yeah, like the first time he drove his brother to school,
There it
it was
is.
raining, and
Yeah.
I mean I was on Life 360 like the entire time, just watching them move, watching the dot move. Yeah. So no, I get that.
So the things you have to look forward to, TJ.
Yep.
Although they'll have
who
brain
knows what
chips
they'll
by
have.
then. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can like look through their eyeballs or something.
I mean,
Exactly.
we might be in a technology-less dystopia by then. So who knows?
That's right. It's fighting wars with sticks. Dear listeners, if this podcast meant anything to you, or if you know a 67891 who this would be helpful for, do share. Intro music by The Collection. Outro music here is by the great Brian Claxton. And if you want to support our work, you can always do so on Patreon. Joey, they can meet you. They can find you at WeSolutions.life, correct?
Correct.
And if you are on the Instagram, Joey's work can be found at Enneagram Parents, and fantastic stuff. And she does the huge honor of posting some of her video clips from our last interview, and those were very well done.
Thanks for giving me such good material.
Come on. Well, it's always a delight having you, and I'm very thankful for your work and how it spurs us on to better thinking. TJ, you got anything else?
I'm glad we got to be like. I feel like I was a little less sort of like starstruck for this one, and I felt more engaged. And that being said, this was still an incredibly informative conversation, and I am so grateful for the work that you have done to get to a place where you are generous and you want to see other people pick up this stuff, and I love it. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you both so much.
Well, she's Joey Schewee. She's incredible. He's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. Who you aren't just isn't interesting.